Hi everyone, a difficult subject today. I'm going to be talking about grief and loss, and there's a very good reason why I think I'm a bit of an expert on that, not just my professional qualifications, but also a personal story this week. If you've ever suffered the loss of an animal, a companion animal, then this video might just help you. My name's Patricia Warby from Alchemy Therapies, and I usually post regular weekly videos on subjects to do with emotional healing, trauma, and recovery. But this week, it's a very, very personal story of what's happened to me in the last 2 weeks or so. Yeah, you may have noticed I've not been as active online, and there's a very good reason. So I'm personally going through grief right now. I lost my beloved companion animal, Sidney, on Monday. Now, I'm able to talk about it. Oh, it's a few days later, but it's still very raw. And the first week is pretty awful, to be fair. But I want not to give the full personal story. I've done that elsewhere. I might include a link to that if any of you want to know anything about Sidney's life and how much he affected me. What I want to talk about more here is dealing with the preparation and the aftermath of a situation in which we have very little choices and what we call disenfranchised grief. When my mother died 4 years ago now, yeah, 4 years ago, I also did a video on the nature of grief and loss, and it was very raw too, but it was not the same. And I think one of the main reasons is you are flooded with support when a parent dies or a relative of any kind. We had hundreds of cards, people poured out their sympathy. In this situation, this is a very different one because pet loss, I hate even using that word pet, is considered something you just get over, something that shouldn't affect you that greatly because it was just a cat or a dog or a rabbit or whatever it was. But you consider that these are they're not human, but they're soulful living creatures who shared your life for however long they were with you. In my case, 14 and a half years I had him. And usually, and indeed, the last time I did a recording, he would have been right here with me, next to me in the window. He used to lie next to me often when I was working. He was around every single day. He was a silent but beautiful, noble, unjudgmental character who just needed me for the basics in life: somewhere safe to sleep, food to eat, and occasional strokes and companionship when he felt like it. He wasn't a lap cat, but he let you know that he was happy to be around. And the loss of him, to suddenly come home and he's not here, is absolutely immense. And I can't even tell you the pain. But the nature of this is that not only do you have a grief that maybe other people don't recognize, although many do, because many of my friends and certainly a lot of my clients are highly sensitive people, and highly sensitive people are very connected empathically to animals. We have a huge animal connection. And so they did understand, but there are many people out there who don't. And, when just to tell you a brief story, we came from the vet. We were in the reception area after having said goodbye. Somebody in the reception area was saying, "Oh, you just lost your pet. Oh, you know, we've done that many times. The best thing is to get another one." And you're like, hold on a minute, we've really just said goodbye. And you wouldn't say that to a person who was grieving the loss of a human friend or family member, would you? So it just felt very inappropriate and very unfeeling, actually, because this is a personal connection. So, you know, that's one of the differences, I think, between the grief I'm going through at the moment and the grief I went through 4 years ago, was that one was socially sanctioned, and I could take time off work and everyone would say, oh, compassionate leave, etc., etc. I could take time off work. Indeed, I have. I've taken the last 2 or 3 days off, but you don't get it paid. It isn't regarded as well, it's a disenfranchised grief. There you are. That's exactly what that means. And so it's such an important concept that we allow ourselves to grieve properly. I've been spending the last few days, apart from sleeping, which, because one of the cardinal signs of grief, it's a complex emotion, by the way. It contains many different emotions. It's sadness, anger, there might be some guilt. I'll talk about that in a moment. There is a physical component to grief. There is a feeling of absolute dead weight on you, like you've been punched in the gut. For me, also, fatigue is terrible. Appetite loss, just don't, it's coming back, but the first couple of days, I really didn't want to eat much. And insomnia, awful insomnia, because your system is really dysregulated by the loss. Your nervous system is responding to the fact that something that you have grown accustomed to is suddenly taken away. And because it's complex with an animal, it's not something they chose necessarily, although you could say at a spiritual level, maybe they did. In this case, I had to choose for him when to go. And so there's that complexity of, did I do the right thing? Was it his time? Did I do it too soon? Did I do it too late? Would he have recovered or not? You have absolutely no idea, because they can't tell you. All you have to go by is their behaviors. And having lived with him for a long time and noticing a gradual decline, because he had chronic digestive issues, and also eventually he had dental issues as well, which were causing him significant pain, I think. But because it happens very, very gradually in this case, I know it's not the same with everybody, and sometimes it's very sudden, or they may lose their animal to an accident or a very sudden medical emergency. But in our case, it was a gradual decline. And so you have to make that call, which I've never had to do in my life before. I've never had to make that decision. Very, very tough. I've been watching a lot of videos on that, just to kind of get my head around. Initially, about a week ago, he started showing symptoms that things really weren't right. He stopped eating for a few days, and then after an antibiotic shot and a anti-inflammatory medication, he began eating again. But then it started to get really excessive, and he wasn't putting on any weight. So there were signs, I think, that things were going to go downhill. But the thing with an animal is they just can't tell you. So I watched a lot of videos in the days leading up to kind of making the decision. It had to be soon. When was it going to be? What to look out for. He had 4 out of 10 of the cardinal signs. One of the problems was that he was eating manically, and one of the cardinal signs is that they show no interest in food. So it was really, really hard. But we knew his behavior, and this wasn't normal for him. He was normally a very picky eater, and now he was just eating everything ravenously. So I started to watch some videos online from people who'd been through this kind of decision-making process, and also from vets who guide people through this process, because I wanted to prepare myself for what was coming. But I have to tell you that the last weekend, because we made the decision on a Friday for the following Monday, the last weekend was like a countdown process, which maybe with the assisted dying bill in the UK going through the motions now, it might come to a point where we deal with humans in that way. But I think at the moment, the timing of your death is not up to you, is it, generally? But with an animal, the companion animal's owner has to make that decision. And so it's a very, very strange experience and incredibly painful to anticipate the death of someone. I keep saying someone, but to me, he was a someone. Because you are thinking, oh, I've got 3 days to go, 2 days to go, 24 hours, 5 hours. The final morning, I was beside myself, quite literally, with anxiety, because what if it went wrong? What if I couldn't get him? What if he ran away? I put everything in place to facilitate it. And in fact, his last morning was incredibly calm. He was actually a lot calmer that morning than the previous 2 days, where I think he reflected my state. So I just went out walking. I walked and wept because I knew in a few moments I was going to have to come back and take him to the vet. So this anticipatory grief is unique to this experience. And when you've made the decision to euthanize, and we had, it's something that you have to deal with. And I'm going to include some links actually below, because in the UK there are some very good resources. I'm sure the same is true in Europe and elsewhere in the world, in the US, for instance. But I only know the UK situation, so I'm going to post some links there, and it's accessible to everyone, so it doesn't really matter. But there are some wonderful resources, particularly from the Cats Protection League, who are a UK charity, who have the most incredible resources. I wish I'd found them beforehand. I only found them afterwards, which is why I'm doing this video, because I want anybody who's preparing for this or having gone through this to know that there is support out there from like-minded people who really understand what you're going through or what you went through. So they have a pause to listen service, which is a phone line you can ring and chat to people. Even if you're not going through euthanasia or post-bereavement, maybe you've lost your cat, or the cat's missing in some way, or it's recovering from a serious illness. There's that pause to listen service. There's also a lot of support pages, which I truly wish I'd found beforehand, because they go through the whole process of learning to let go, learning to deal with grief, and so on. And so thank you, Cats Protection League, for putting that together. I just actually put a memory on their memory wall as well for Sidney Bobcat, to give him his full title. And I've received a wonderful email back confirming that my submission will go live in 1 to 3 days. They do review them, obviously, for content, making sure it's appropriate what you've put. And you can then send that link out to other people, maybe other people who want to understand, or people who knew the animal, family members, whatever. So I have to say, hats off to them. That's really incredible. So the nature of loss, then, I did watch a couple of videos by emergency veterinarian Sarah Hoggan. And again, we'll include the links to her videos below. TED Talks that she did 5 years ago, I think, and 2 years ago, on why pet loss is so difficult. And one of the things she said, which really resonated with me, was that, you know, it can be more difficult to cope with the loss of a pet, not just because it's not franchised, as it were, socially, but because the unconditional love you received from an animal is very different to that of potentially a family member. And she said, and this did make the audience chuckle, they never criticized you and never looked disappointed by you. Okay, they were just delighted to be with you all the time and would look at you with total love. And that's not always the case in families. Okay, and I know that because I work with a lot of people who've had relational trauma, complex trauma from childhood. So, you know, it's complex with families, and it's not always unconditional, but it always is with an animal. So the nature of loss then is different. The it can't be forestalled, by the way. There's no way of stopping the grief. There's no way of making it happen in a certain order, or knowing exactly how it's going to play out. It's a very individual process. I know this because there's two of us in my family, and I'm going through it in my way, and my partner's going through it in her way too. And it's good to have support. If you're on your own going through this, I would say reach out to another highly sensitive person who understands the nature of loss from pet loss, because it's the last thing you want to hear is, "Oh, why are you so upset?" It's only a pet. So it's the post-loss grief process then is a long, well, it's individual, but it's not going to be over in a day or two. All right. I wasn't sure how I'd react. I thought maybe I'd feel relief. I really did think I'd feel relief, because the last 2 weeks have been, no disrespect to Sidney himself, but very, very hard to maintain him. We've been up most nights 2, 3, 4, 5 times, because he would wake, he would need comfort, letting out, or food. And so our sleep has been completely disrupted for weeks. And, for that to disappear, you think, oh, that will be a relief. But that hasn't been the case, because the awful thing is there's a part of you, your heart is broken. The soul connection, which is heart-based, is lost. Your head then tries to make sense of that. And in doing so, it will run over and over and over and over all the ifs and buts and maybes. And one of the things it will tell you is, you shouldn't be either feeling the way you're feeling, or you could have done something differently. Particularly if you had to take the animal to the vet, which we did, and leave him there, because that was our decision, not to bury him but to cremate. To come home without him felt absolutely awful, and a part of me wanted to blame myself. You shouldn't have done that. You could have done it differently. You could have saved him. You could have done more. And this again, Sarah Hoggan, the vet, explains that in another video. That kind of rumination, overthinking, where you're just trying to fix it. You're trying to find the problem that you can sort, or certainly that part of your brain is, and it drives you to absolute distraction and huge distress. Understand that this is normal, okay? I'm not saying you should stop doing that. You can't. It's part of the process. But you can soothe yourself and tell yourself you did the absolute best you could with the information you had at the time. Whether, yes, you could have done things differently, but that's hindsight. And we don't have a crystal ball, do we, to know how we should have dealt with things previously. So I think knowing that putting the emotions into words is also another really important component to dealing with this grief. As I said, I've just written something on Sidney's memory wall on the Cats Protection UK site. I've also determined to record some memories of him as well. I may do a separate video of that. And just kind of allow the feelings, allow. When we talk about recovery from any form of trauma, it's all about allowing feelings to be expressed, not repressed. If they are repressed, they go into the body, they don't disappear, they start to create symptoms, which is why, people start to get chronic illness and chronic pain. So self-forgiveness and self-soothing are really key components, but also allowing the feelings when they're there to be verbalized, if possible, certainly expressed in some way. Some people want to talk it through. Other people want to just be quiet and do something that gives, something that gives back. You know, I've done a lot of gardening in the last couple of days because it's nurturing, it's growing, it's communicating love. Actually, I do think gardening is that. And so remembering your animal also in a way that allows them to be remembered well, and all the things they gave you, because you know it's a bit of a trope, but you know you can't grieve unless you've loved, and you dearly loved the animal and they loved you. And so having remembered them with joy and gratitude is also important. Otherwise, you will stay mired in grief. They came, they gave, they left. It's not your fault. It's just what happened, whether it was accidental or, in my case, gradual, and then we had to make that call. It's the nature of life that it will end at some point, and coming to terms with that is always difficult. But having someone by your side and having support and having the tools in order to mobilize your grief is also really, really key. Now, folks, I'm not going to go on any longer. I think that's enough for today. I'm going to put some resources below. If anything comes up in the next week or two, which I think might be helpful, I may do another. But for the moment, I just want to say, if you've ever been through this, if you've ever faced this dilemma, or you're facing it right now, I send you my deepest sympathy and love, because it's one of the most difficult things I've ever been through. So if any of what I've said today strikes you as something you'd like to resolve and you'd like to get in touch, you can find me on alchemytherapies.co.uk and also patriciawarby.com. Take care, everybody. Bye for now.